Today's show features Helle Jorgensen, the CEO of Competent Boards, and we are talking about future boardroom competencies. Helle Jorgensen is the CEO of Competent Boards that offers the global online environment, social, and governance Competent Board certification program with a faculty of over 100 renowned international board members, executives, and experts. So Helle, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Maureen. It is a pleasure to join you.
You mentioned in our prior conversation something about Davos. Where did this latest set of initiatives come from?
It was straightforward. I was frustrated, Maureen. I was frustrated by I guess, the lack of sustainability and climate insight, as I just said, in the boardroom. And I saw the lack of these ESG competences. So, as you've said, the lack of environmental, social governance insight in the boardroom, leading to frustrated employees, lost business opportunities, growing reputational risk, and basically value destruction for the company and its stakeholders. As a shareholder, I saw a lack of oversight of some of the most material risk and opportunities facing businesses that could impact my retirement savings, your retirement savings. I've seen the environmental and social risk and opportunities increase over the past 30 years, where I have advised many of the world's largest companies. And I found that the right ESG competencies at the top make it much easier to translate environmental and social care to financial results and to make a purposeful culture in the company stick. And I've seen that good governance and oversight and the structure can move environmental or social initiatives that most companies have had for many, many years. But if you don't have the governance, you need to move from this initiative as a project to an integrated value-creating process. Long story short, I asked the chair of Unilever at that point, Michael Tresco, and at that point, the CEO, Paul Polman, and a handful of other global board chairs and CEOs and investors and other experts that I had worked with to help me create an ESG education program that was aimed at the board of directors and executives, but also investors. I was happy. All the global leaders I asked, they said yes. And we got to start this, what I'm almost going to say, the most rewarding project I have ever taken on. As you mentioned, we launched in Davos during the World Economic Forum. That's big. But perhaps even bigger, we changing minds and hearts for a better future and exponentially impacting how the world's leaders transform our society for the better. It's quite remarkable feeling and to hear the board members that been through the program tell me that the ESG Competent Board Certificate Program have given them confidence to really bring these things up in the boardroom to help transform their companies to be companies of the future. Incredible for me. The value that they create for themselves and the companies, those who've been through the program and their stakeholders. I'm proud of it. And I'm proud that we now have 100 global leaders as part of our faculty, educating current and future board members. And now we have over 100 board members and executives going through the program. In short, I've combined my 30 years of ESG experience with the insight and expertise of the many global leaders I've had the opportunity to work with. And we didn't used to have the term ESG 30 years ago, when that was the time where I created the first green account in the world. And I helped the EU with directives called non-financial reporting, and got to design the world's first holistic supply chain and design the world's first integrated report. So at that point, we called ESG factors, as I just said, non-financial factors or CSR or health and safety, etc. This term ESG nowadays, it's used to describe the material factors that they include in their process to identify material risk and growth opportunities for companies.
For listeners who don't get to see Helle's face, just the smile and the delight in her ability to make an impact in the world that is dramatic. It's beautiful to see. Let's shift now to the Competent Boards report. What is the report? Why did you do it?
Marie, I was just thinking, I've been saying ESG for a while. Does it make sense just to let everyone know? Because I know that some go like, what is ESG? Even though we said environment, social governance. Does it make sense just to kind of like make sure we're all on the same page and understand what we mean by it?
Yes, thank you. And I also heard you say why it matters, but maybe again, the encapsulated, looking at all stakeholders, not just stockholders, drives financial bottom line, and helps across the ecosystem capture the costs to the ecosystem, world, people, ecology that we didn't previously quantify, but that as large companies, as governments, we extract more than we put in. We use more than our Earth can regenerate, and we need to find a way to quantify and manage those previously unmanaged costs to our world. So yes, please.
Well, I just find often that, giving the ABC of ESG is kind of like to ensure that we all know what we're talking about. And it is not as complicated as some might think. Maybe I should just say, well, again, E is environment, S is social, G is governance. When we say environment, it covers, for example, the use of energy, the use of water, resources. So what we as companies and households use to in our daily life, but to produce the goods and the services. It covers the pollution that the business and the products create, and how climate change, but also diversity crisis impact the stakeholders, but also, of course, the business. It's about, do you care about your impact on nature and the environment that provide you with clean air, water, and food? Are you prepared for the impact of climate change, biodiversity loss on your business? To cut to the chase, do you make your money by improving or exploiting nature? And the new word that we also using, and sorry, there's so many words in this, but that's regenerative business. Are you having a business process that ensure regenerative businesses?
Is that also the circular economy?
The circular economy comes into that, right? So we don't take more than we put back, if you can put it like that, but actually support life instead of the opposite. That brings us a little bit into the S, so the social. And that's where you have your stakeholder relations. That's where you have health and safety. That's where you have mental health, human rights issues in the full value chain, but also responsible use of data, privacy, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Your talent management, your human capital, your product ethics, employee engagement, or perhaps in the same way as I said before, do you care about the health and well-being of your stakeholders? Do you make your money by improving or exploiting people's well-being? All of those things been going on in companies for a long, long time, and we all know about the reputational impact, etc. Where the governance comes in is that is kind of like when we look at the board of directors, the composition of that board of directors, the business ethics. Are we discussing our lobbying position? Do we pay to something and say the opposite? Our ESG integration oversight, compensation, culture, how you govern and report on the progress of all of these things. And I think also governance, and I think this is why I feel it's important, it will ensure that you focus on the material E&S, so environmental and social matters. It will ensure that you report in a trustworthy way, and it will make change stick. It will move the environmental and social initiative from this a project to becoming integrated value-creating processes. I hope that kind of like was level setting a little bit and making sure we're all on the same page.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. And do you want to say any more about why this matters?
Yeah, happy to do that. And as well, how come that it does not matter, right? Many companies are larger than countries, and they have supply chains that cover the world. And many have products that being sold worldwide, products that are impacting lives and the environment in a good or a bad way. And like it or not, We live in an interconnected world. We live in a world where pollution does not respect borders, same way as COVID-19, and where a picture of human rights abuse can travel the world in a second. I believe and I know that more and more people care about how companies behave. Sure, Maureen, you know, your retirement funds are probably invested in a lot of companies. So whether you can look at it as to, I want to optimize my savings and therefore making sure that we have the right oversight, or you look at it to ensure that your children, your grandchildren will be able to live a healthy life. Whatever you do, you would want to ensure that you hold the companies and the boards accountable for making informed decisions. And I guess that's the problem. Many boards are not being informed and therefore clearly have the difficulties providing the oversight that both the stakeholders and the shareholders they expect. That's why there is such a demand for, well, the ESG competent board members right now. If you look at the world's largest asset managers like BlackRock, I guess they have over $7 trillion under management. They have made climate change central to their investment strategy for 2021. But they also expect companies to not only disclose a plan for the transition to this lower carbon economy we are talking so much about, but also to improve racial and gender diversity, to understand who are their key stakeholders, what are their business interests really, what's the purpose. They have also said, BlackRock, but also many of the others, that they will vote against board members if they don't see progress. That, to me, is a very significant signal. I believe BlackRock and many of the others, they have such a substantial stake in most of the companies around the world. That's a huge impact. It's also a huge responsibility. These many investors and proxy advisors that called for board members to become ESG competent, I'm happy about it. And I think that you'll see that the ESG Competent Board Certificate program and the Global Competent Boards designation mentioned in proxy statements and board bios, etc., going forward, to send that signal to the investors, to stakeholders, to asset managers, to proxy advisors, that your board members actually have an understanding of these issues and therefore understanding of how to steward this company and bring it forward, not only in the short-term and short-term financial, but also long-term, and have the ability to really drive a company to be successful.
What I hear you saying is we're going to do what makes sense for the range of stakeholders, not one group or another group, but environmental, social, and also economic. We're not going to make decisions that don't also drive organizational health.
At the end of the day, if you can't pay your employees, what good is it? You need to be sustainable, right? And sustainable means that both have the financial means, but at the same time, care. So it's kind of like I've said a few times, cash is still king, but care is the queen. If you do not care about your employees, you do not care about your customers, if you do not care about all the other stakeholders, you will lose the loyalty from them and you will not be able to have the cash in the future. And the other thing is, frankly, well, you can have all the cash in the world, but if the world do not succeed, you don't want to sit there with all your money but can't really use them for anything or look at a burning world, right? And I think especially perhaps the younger generation, Maureen, should we say we also the younger generation, but
relative to what?
Those that are younger than us, perhaps even more, they want to work, they want to use products, etc., that they believe in. They don't want to leave their values before they go into the workplace. They want to live the values, they want to understand, they want to be proud of the company. And hey, don't we all want to have employees being proud of our companies? Shouldn't board members also be proud of the companies? Of course they should.
The reason I bring up the balance across stakeholders is I'm sure some folks are listening who are saying you people are just going too far. And I want to respond and point out, I guess, that you are really looking at balancing across all stakeholders because both of us want to retire someday and not live on cat food.
We also need to be pragmatic, right? The company, the board of directors needs to identify who are their most mature stakeholders and then need to balance out of that. If I don't think that that's the right balance, well, that's my choice then. I don't want to work there. I don't want to buy the products. I don't want to invest in them. But I think the transparency of putting it out there so that others can decide. And it's not as easy as it is because, frankly, Maureen, if we say, well, you need to do what every stakeholder in the world tells you to do, that's impossible. Leadership is about leading. They, being the leaders, you need to identify who are the most mature stakeholders, what are the most mature issues, and then be true and report on that. And that's the questions where you also start asking what is the purpose? What is the purpose of the organization? But also what is the purpose of the board of directors?
Beautiful. And talk about the content of the reset report.
What are the competencies the future boardroom should look at? Normally we have the boardroom matrix, the skills matrix, but what are the real competencies? Perhaps not only those, yes, I can understand a P&L, I can read the income statement, I can read the balance sheet, but also some of these other more personal traits that seems to be changing for what we need in the boardroom. And so we started to kind of like look into what does good governance look like? What is it? And I think you started, Maureen, you start in terms of saying, well, so much is changing. There is a sense of urgency surrounding these environmental, social, but also the more humanitarian problems. That's leading to this social pressure on the board of directors to take action. We need board of directors to upgrade their competences, bring new competences into the boardroom. And again, knowing that all of these ESG competent board members that we have through the program are in demand, I just saw that we needed to figure out what should this look like. And so we went out and asked all of our 100 global leaders on their view on 4 questions. And I'll come back to those 4 questions. And we also asked other global leaders, and it's quite fascinating to have all of these fantastic, basically the who's who within global leadership, coming back to you and say, yeah, we need different kind of competences. Maybe we have them, but here are some of the competences we really need to ensure that we have, and that so that we understand, I guess, all the capitals that companies are impacting and the outcome, so that board of directors understand the full breadth and depth. And you can say, you understand a financial P&L or income statement, but do you understand the externalities that are not included in financials? Do you have a transformational mindset? Are you able to read an integrated report and understand how a company is impacting and being impacted by its surroundings? And I think that was some of the things that kind of like got us to say, let's try to get some insight from all of these global leaders. We basically reached out to all of these global leaders, and we asked 4 questions. The first question was, what does stewardship in the 21st century look like? Then what does a future prepared board member look like? Then what new competences are or should be demanded of board members? And what are the personal traits? What are the qualities? What are the diverse perspectives that's really needed in the boardroom? And we got, as I said, all of this insight, and we started to say, okay, how do we put this out? And like X% think that, being courageous. Oh, does that mean that the rest of the do not mean that is important, etc.? So we dropped all the nice graphics in terms of percentages, but instead got to graphics that was more infographics, where we did word clouds And we ended up doing 4 different word clouds, where stewardship in the 21st century was basically the world map with a person in the middle. And then where we had 3 other symbols that I'll come back to, one being the brain of this person, one being the heart, and one being the hand, kind of like in terms of action. And then we kind of like looked at all of these issues that needed to be connected. And I wish all your listeners could see this, and hopefully they will download the report. But purpose is kind of like one of the things that is in the middle of all of this. It's transparency, it's better society, it's accountability, it's relationships, it's community. It's really understanding the world we're living in. Stewardship in the 21st century is not only about being stewards of the balance sheet, but being stewards of all of the capitals of the company. Put a huge risk and huge opportunity on the shoulders of these board members. The next question we ask, what does a future prepared board member look like? And that's where we put this brain out. When we then looked at the brain of this board member, one of the things that came in there was future prepared. It was an open listener, adaptive, being driven by strategy and purpose, have the ability to prioritize, being collaborative, being emotional intelligent. Emotional intelligence is a thing I hear more and more. And it clearly here during the pandemic, we have really seen that the leaders that understand to be emotional intelligent, those that care, they also have the loyalty of society at large. It's also culture-driven, long-term focus, integrity, and awareness and engagement, transparency and accountability.
That's one that I thought was really helpful because we see so often, especially from our next generation, the idea of transparency and accountability because they inherit what we create.
Trust is something that's so dear. It's the currency. Mm-hmm. If people don't trust you, and it's really difficult in this world where you have fake news and you have all of this. So that's why having these relationships with your community, having the relationship with your stakeholders really can help you.
One of the others was integrity, was on that list. The foundation of trust.
Correct. And integrity is on that list. That is also, of course, essential. And that's also where, if you can think about it from a boardroom perspective, you need to have the integrity. You need to ask you can call it the stupid questions. I would call it the smart questions, because your job is to ask questions as a board member, right? Your job is to understand the answers. Your job is to have the oversight, really understand the subject matter, but do it with integrity. Boardrooms need to go in and look at this and say, okay, might not be everyone in the boardroom say, yeah, I am emotional intelligence. Then you might want to say, how do we ensure that we're not missing the boat on some of this?
So I think you hit on something that's really important. Everyone won't have all of them. Now we expect all of them to have integrity. We expect all of them to act with accountability and courage, but people will vary on their level of skill in some of the other areas.
Yeah, that's what diversity also is about, right? If we were all coming in with exactly the same, you only needed one person in that boardroom, right? So that's why another thing where we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, really to have the courage also to invite different viewpoints into the boardroom, but also have the integrity and respectful discussion of these matters. That's so important. And that perhaps where the next one we had on what new competencies are or should be demanded of board members. Being a sense maker, stakeholder focused, high standard of ethics, SDG competent. SDG will be the Sustainable Development Goals. So what I call the 17 biggest pain points in the world, that the whole world came together in 2015 and say, this is what we need to achieve by 2030. We have a few years back. There's a lot to do. And climate competent, another thing we are discussing. So that's where governance, that's where sustainable leadership, long-term businesses come into play.
And that was where you also had transformational leadership.
Yes, exactly. That's where you also have the transformational leadership. So think about this, like the reason why we put it as a hand is kind of like, these are skills, right? These are some skills. Most of them you will say, being ESG competent, I can teach you that. Being SDG competent, I can teach you that. High standards for ethics, I hope that your mother and your father or others taught you that, right? It's a kind of like, it's a given if you're in the boardroom. I hope that you have a high standard for ethics. But nevertheless, many of the leaders that we asked about, what does this look like, say that is a demand. So to think about if that is something that you or others are also not only talking about, but practicing.
So now let's move to the heart.
In terms of the heart, what are the personal traits, the qualities, and diverse perspectives that's needed in the boardroom? And yes, we mark that with the heart, and diversity is right in the middle. The inclusive and committed to diversity and equity is so important. We have the Women's International Day coming up. We have had the Black History Month, etc. These are not things that are just in a month or a day. These are things that are all year round. And we need to have, and I think everyone that we surveyed, we're like, diversity, equity, inclusion is important also for the benefit of the corporation, right? I mean, this is not just, tick mark. Yes, we have that. This is really important. Courage, curious, really ask those questions. Entrepreneurship was a very interesting term that I found came up clearly. Now being an entrepreneur after a long career, not being an entrepreneur, was fascinating, because I think what many of these global leaders are saying is we need people that can think out of the box. We need non-linear thinkers. We are faced with so many new challenges all the time. And we need to have that entrepreneurship mentality of everything is possible and the agility to do it. And the other thing was being forthrightness and having the innovative, being creative, having the empathy. Empathy, being humble, being wise, but also being pragmatic. And I think that is one of the things that's important for me, that this is not just, okay, that's too much. Let's be pragmatic, right? Let's really see how can we go far together instead of kind of like saying we need to be 190% on one of these things, because then we're not going to reach all of them. For me, that's important as well. Long-term leadership, humility, many of things in here.
I really liked the combination of humble, pragmatic, and wise. If I think about how do I want to show up, or what essence do I want the people with whom I am working to make decisions, wisdom is certainly pulling from their range of experiences over time. I'm thinking almost of coal to diamonds, taking all of those experiences and compressing them. What comes out is the diamond of a human: compassionate, wise, humble, pragmatic.
One of the leaders is saying, what would you do if this was your child? The companies were your child. How would you look at different things? And I think there's kind of like very simple way of looking at it.
You're teaching the Competent Boards program. How do you teach people these competencies? Because this is a lot to take in. Some of it is what we learned from our parents. Some of it is what you teach in a program. And let's do a short on that, because I want to make sure people, if they didn't download the report from the blog, that they know where to find it.
And you can say the ESG Competent Board Certificate Program, that are more focused on these environmental, social, governance matters. And clearly all of the other things we just talked about are in play. It is this transformational mindset, putting all the dots together that they're learning. I would say that's kind of like, we have 12 different strategic sessions where you go in and really dive in, so that you as a board member or as an executive have the insight, have the confidence to provide the oversight and as I say, foresight as well. We have actually started the race to the top and launched what we call top 100 ESG competent boards and top 100 ESG competent board members. If I may, I would love to ask all of you listening to nominate a company's board or an individual board member to be part of the top 100 ESG competent boards or top 100 ESG competent board members. I believe that if we make this a race to the top and showcase all of these people that are doing good things, those that you know, and you say, I trust, please nominate them.
How would they nominate them? Do they email you?
If they download the report, in that report, there's actually a link where you can then go in and nominate. You can also go in and say, you know what, I feel that there's something missing here in all of these competencies that you put in here. I think you also should have whatever. We are collecting that at the moment. None of us have the answers to all of these things. So
where would they go to download the report?
Go to our website, which would be www and then competentboards with an S at the end and .com. And that's also where you, by the way, can find the ESG Competent Board Certificate Program and see the testimonials and the feedback from the many board members and executives who have now achieved the Global Competent Boards designation and the ESG Competent Board Certificate.
And I really do encourage people to download it if you are interested in board competencies, if you are running a board, or if you're leading a company. These are also the same competencies that our executives should be considering. I believe you also run a program for executives. I know this is not a commercial paid program, but you also do.
I do, yes. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Helle, so much for sharing your report, all of the work you're doing to move the ESG board competency construct forward. Corporations are much larger than countries in some cases, and how they behave matters to our long-term physical health as well as our financial health. So thank you for the work you're doing there and for sharing all of your information with our guests.
Well, and thank you so much for all the work you're doing. This was fun.